Lycanthropy, the idea that humans can turn into wolves. How does one become a werewolf? Back in the day, it was believed that there were a lot of different ways. One was by being cursed, another was being bitten or scratched by another werewolf, or by consorting with witches and demons and vampires. The werewolf is in modern times also associated with the full moon and silver bullets. Silver bullets because silver is the metal associated with the moon. What do werewolves look like? In their human form, they were said to have unibrows, curved fingernails, low-set ears, and a swinging stride. Russian superstition said that they had bristles under their tongue. Southern Slavic and Kashubian people in what is now known as Poland said that if a child was born with hair, a birthmark, or a caul on their head, then they were shapeshifters. In wolf form, some legends say that wolves are indistinguishable from werewolves, or sometimes werewolves in wolf form are portrayed as not having a tail, or being larger than regular wolves, or having human eyes or a human voice. What are the origins of the werewolf legend? The earliest traces of the werewolf legend appear to trace back from ancient Greece. Herodotus even wrote in his histories of a tribe where people transformed into wolves once every year and then shifted back into humans. During the Viking Age, there were also Germanic pagan traditions associated with wolf men. My own Romanian ancestors, the Dacians, were also suspected to have a special relationship with wolves. According to Mircea Eliade, they may have called themselves ones the same with wolves. They may draw their name from a god or legendary ancestor who appeared to them as a wolf. They may have spent a year of initiation living as wolves, and they may also have had a ritual that provided them with the ability to turn into wolves, possibly a military initiation. Also on Trajan's column, there is the Dacian Draco, the wolf head attached to a dragon tail on a stick. They would actually bring these things onto the battlefield in order to scare the enemy. Because the head was hollow, so wind would blow through it and make a screeching sound, the Draco was the Dacian army's emblem. So here we see syncretism between dragon, serpent, and wolf imagery. Now, dragon and serpent imagery tend to go hand in hand. Back in the day, dragons were sort of like half serpents, but here we also see the addition of the wolf. Legend says that a big white wolf fought next to the Dacians when the capital of Sarmisegetusa fell to the Romans. According to Armenian legend, sinful women are sometimes condemned to spend 7 years in wolf form. They're visited by a spirit cloaked in wolfskin who orders them to wear it, and then the woman develops a craving for human flesh and devours her children, then her relatives' children, and she scours the outdoors at night and in the morning reverts back to human form. Which, this entire legend reminds me a little bit of the Selkie legend, though it's much more thickly veiled in religious warning. During the medieval era, this was something I had no idea about. Werewolf lore was associated with the witch trials. In the 15th century, there were trials against supposed werewolves in French Switzerland, which then spread throughout Europe, peaked in the 17th century, and subsided in the 18th. These were not just accusations of lycanthropy, those were kind of a minority, but also accusations of wolf charming or wolf riding. For example, in 16th century France, there were numerous reports of werewolf attacks and court trials with wolf charming accusations. In 1573, Gilles Garnier was convicted of being a werewolf. And during this time, there was sort of a schism between two types of werewolf lore. One was the more Germanic and French werewolf, who was associated with witchcraft. And then there was the Slavic Eastern European werewolf, who was associated with the vampire. Now, in the 18th century, there's something really interesting called the Beast of Gévaudan. In the mountains of south-central France between 1764 and 1767, there were a series of animal attacks believed to be caused by a wolf or wolf-like creature. The beast was described, according to multiple witnesses and survivors, as having a tawny or russet fur with streaks and stripes down its back, including one going down its tail, and its tail ending in a tuft. It also was said to have big teeth and claws and to be the size of a cow, and it was able to fly across fields towards its victims. So modern day we speculate maybe it was a wolf, a lion, a striped hyena, a large dog. In the summer of 1764 was the first attack. A young woman was tending cattle in the forest when she saw a beast that she described like a wolf, yet not a wolf, lunge at her. The bulls that were around her charged the beast. Later that summer there was 14-year-old Jeanne Boulet who was killed near her village by supposedly the beast. And in August, another 14-year-old had the same fate. In later August and September, there were more attacks in the region reported, and terror started to grip the locals. Reports noted that the beast only bit the victims' heads or neck regions. People began to whisper of the creature's supernatural abilities, like being able to come back from the dead. Then in late September, a man killed a large gray wolf that was identified as the attacker by several survivors. The wolf was stuffed and sent to Versailles. However, before long, new attacks began. The attacks only stopped after a hunter named Jean Chastel shot a large wolf in 1767. There's a story that it was done with silver bullets, but this detail was added on later in the 20th century by authors. The current hypothesis is that the cause, the beast of Gévaudan, was an Italian wolf, since they're known to have reddish pelts, dark stripes on their backs, and distinct skull shapes. But at the time, wolf attacks were a very serious issue throughout Europe, accounting for thousands of deaths. Then in 1941, there was the film The Wolfman, which is responsible for much of what we currently associate with werewolves. The writer came up with the full moon and the death by silver bullet concept, and he later explained that the werewolf was a symbol for other types of monsters. Siodmak was Jewish, and he fled Europe during the rise of the Nazis. He said, "I was forced into a fate I didn't want. To be a Jew in Germany, I would not have chosen that as my fate. The swastika represents the moon. When the moon comes up, the man doesn't want to murder, but he knows he cannot escape it. The wolf-man destiny." So that's kind of a simple history of lycanthropy. But what is the psychology of lycanthropy? What is behind these legends that really touch on a nerve for us? More broadly, what is the psychology of shapeshifting into another animal? It's basically about taking on the qualities and traits associated with that animal for a psychological purpose. For example, cats are mischievous and independent. Dogs are loyal and friendly. Foxes are sneaky. Lots of ancient tribes had situations and rituals where they would mimic a certain animal and try to sort of embody its skin, as it were, in order to infuse themselves with the energy of that animal. Like, for instance, infusing themselves with the energy of a wolf before battle. Now, for lycanthropy specifically, what are the traits associated with wolves? They're keen hunters. They do also have a sense of teamwork or community, but they tend to be predators. They tend to be very strong, associated with like modern day conceptions of masculinity. So it's this idea of surrendering to your animalistic instincts for power, but at the cost of your humanity. You become this beast of a person, but you forget your empathy. Now, when it comes to a lot of the symbols that are in modern times associated with wolves, like the moon, we see sort of themes of cyclical transformation. It's surprising to me that werewolves are most often associated with men, because your body changing along with the moon cycle is obviously a very feminine concept, associated with menstruation, what was previously called moon blood. A woman's hormones fluctuate over the course of around 28 days, which is the same length as the cycle of a moon. In olden days, it was believed that the full moon could have a maddening effect on people. It could make them lunatics. That's what the word lunatic comes from, luna, the moon. Essentially, it's about this fear that the elements of nature will transform us against our will, make us lose our minds, turn us into animals. Maybe this was related to the fear of rabies, this fear that being bit by a mad animal will cause infection and then also transform us, making us lose our minds. So it's possible that this lycanthropy fear was rooted in like very real infectious concerns. But in a sense, we are always changing and transforming along like the phases of the moon, from growth periods to shedding periods, from periods of darkness to periods of light. It's the entire concept behind my moon and sun journaling workbook. Now, like I said, silver bullets are associated with werewolves because silver is the element associated with the moon, so that's possibly why they're linked. But again, this was from a later author. It wasn't from the original werewolf lore. Another aspect of the psychology of lycanthropy is this fear of animalism, of vicious predators during a time when nature was indeed quite frightful. Like I said, wolf attacks were a very real thing during the Middle Ages. Before the discovery of the scientific method, any threat that loomed large was eventually attributed to supernatural causes. It becomes almost like a form of mass hysteria, like the witch trials. Specifically, we're afraid of predators, but we're also afraid of our own animalism. Humans are civilized, but we are animals. Some people like to forget that, but werewolf legends are, in essence, a warning against the dangers of succumbing to our animalistic instincts, of losing our sense of humanity, perhaps due to uncontrolled rage, bloodlust, and so on and so forth. In a Freudian sense, werewolves are at the mercy of their id. Now, in the Freudian conception of the psyche, there's the id, ego, and superego. And the id represents all of our primal instincts and urges. And the superego represents our higher sense of morality morality and the ego is kind of trying to make sense of the two. So werewolves are at the mercy of their id. They have, I guess you would say, like a lacking superego. And this concept is inextricably linked to Christian ideology, which tries to erase the animalism of humans, tries to claim that we are above other animals, we are this separate higher caste created in God's image. It reflects this unconscious Christian discomfort with our own animalism. Sorry, I got too hot for the scarf, but werewolves were hunted during the witch trials, people were accused of demonic possession and heresy along with werewolf accusations. The Christian church wanted to make it known that humans must adhere to a norm of civilized behaviors and not fall prey to their id's primal instincts. And those who did not obey were demonized and quite literally portrayed as monsters. Now, all of this is about the psychology of believing in werewolves. But what about the psychology of believing you yourself are a werewolf? This has a name. Apparently it's called clinical lycanthropy, a rare psychiatric disorder in which a person experiences delusions that they can transform into a wolf. According to a systematic review which looked at 77 published cases, 68% of these patients involved canine animals, so like shapeshifting into wolves was still the most common one. It was associated with psychotic disorders in 41% of cases, psychotic depression in 24%, bipolar disorder in 18%, and Cotard syndrome in 12%, and 16% of them engaged in physical violence against others. So it makes me wonder if any of this mass hysteria regarding lycanthropy in history may have in some cases been triggered by people who had mental illnesses and were seen as lunatics due to genuinely having like a psychiatric disorder in which they genuinely experienced delusions that they were turning into wolves. And it also makes me wonder about the relationship between clinical lycanthropy and furries. Now, obviously, I think for the vast majority of furries, there's nothing pathological about it. It's just people, wanting to dress up or maybe having like a fetish for it. Obviously, do whatever you want to do if you think it's fun or sexy. If you genuinely believe that you are turning into that animal, that is no joke. And that is a sign that there might be something psychologically going on, and definitely a sign to seek help, because that could be reflective of a much more serious mental illness. I actually learned a lot in the making of this video. I hope it was as interesting to you as it is for me. HALLOWEEK is just my favorite week of the year. And I know like with the move and with the baby, I haven't been able to make more than one video this year, but I do have a video coming up which is going to be like an apartment tour, how to decorate your apartment like a gothic castle, renter friendly because I am still renting. That one's going to be real fun, but it's not going to be finished until obviously the apartment is finished, which it's not there yet. Everything is much slower since we have the baby now. So I'm hoping to get that out in like November. So definitely stay tuned because that one's going to be a fun one. I hope you have a wonderful HALLOWEEK and I'll see you soon. Tell me what you